Howdy, I'm Corey Milligan, owner of New West Knife Works here in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. New West Knife Works was founded over 15 years ago when I was working in a kitchen much like this. I've always loved to cook and enjoyed using a fine knife, and over 15 years we've really evolved to making some of the finest knives in the world. In your arsenal of knives, you need to have your primary knife, your bread knife or serrated knife, and then the last one that we're going to talk about is a paring knife. The first and most important knife to select is going to be your main knife that you use 90% of the time. Starting from the biggest size, at New West Knife Works we make two different styles of chef knives. We've got the Phoenix line. This is what we call the 9. It's actually a 9-inch blade. A little bit more of a European style to the shape of the blade. And then in the Fusion Wood line, we have what we call the Fusion Wood Chef. It's an 8-inch blade. It definitely has a more of an Asian design style to it with a little thicker in through the tip here. It's my experience amongst professional chefs that it splits right down the middle. A lot of chefs like a bigger, heavier knife. They think they can work with it better all day long. And then a lot of chefs really appreciate the very thin blade that just passes through food like butter. Next size down, which is by far the most popular knife amongst home users these days. This style of knife is called a santoku. It's really a traditional Japanese chef knife shape. It's a little bit smaller than a chef knife. The blade is 7 inches long. It's a little bit lighter in the hand, a little bit more manageable for folks. This is what I find most home cooks who really like to cook really like to be in this size. This is kind of a nice smaller size chef knife, as I would call it. Moving down in the sizes, these are both the same blade shape. This is called a petty knife. And then we also have the chopper here. I think of these as a little bit more of an European style blade design, and this is more of an Asian style. If you aren't necessarily comfortable with a bigger knife, these size knives are still big enough to do everything you want to do on the cutting board, cut meats, vegetables, fruits, all that good stuff. The chopper definitely has a thicker, heavier blade, heavier feel to it. The petty knife is a very thin blade that I like the way it just goes through food really well. With the point, you can make turning cuts. Down here on the end, we have what we call the mini chopper. Now this little knife is pretty small for your all-around do-all cutting board knife. The design reason for this really was you probably have someone in your family who uses a paring knife for everything they do. So this knife was designed for all those folks. With the wide blade as opposed to a narrow blade on a paring knife, it still leaves room for your hands on the cutting board, and you can still do all that kind of chopping, cutting stuff that you do with a bigger chef knife. If you're comfortable with something bigger, I think realistically maybe something bigger is going to do more for you, but if you're afraid of big knives, this is still will take care of business. These are the New West Knife Works chef knives, do-all cutting board knives. One of these knives should be the knife that you buy first and do 90% of all your cutting with. Another essential knife in any functional knife quiver is the bread knife or slicing knife. The key feature on a knife like this is the serrated edge. Serrated edges cut soft food much better than a traditional straight edge. At New West Knife Works, we make a knife called the Super Bread Knife. It cuts like nothing you've ever used before. This knife may not get as much use as your chef knife or do-all cutting board knife, but when you need it, it's really the knife you need. So another essential knife in any knife collection is your paring knife. The paring knife is designed for when you're holding food in your hand and you're cutting it. Think fruits, vegetables, you want to cut the bruises, the stems, the cores out of it. Again, you're holding the food and you're using the knife to cut it. Though I see people do it all the time, this knife is not designed to be used on the cutting board. This is the knife you use to get food ready to put on the cutting board. At New West Knife Works, we have 3 styles of paring knife. The Phoenix paring knife has a very thin blade, very fine point to it. The Fusion Wood paring knife, a great all-around do-everything on the cutting board knife. And then we also have the mini paring knife, which is a real favorite amongst professionals. With the very short blade, you have great control of the tip, so you can really put it in and use it on lots of different stuff. Those are what I consider to be essential knives in every knife quiver. A chef do-all cutting board knife, a serrated bread knife, and a paring knife.